Okay.
You right?
Yeah. Okay.
Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Musical Talk. My name is Nick Cutson. I'm sat here with my lovely friend Rachael. Hello, Rachael. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Very well, thank you. A new voice for the podcast, but you are an ardent theatre fan, and you've just made your way back from living abroad for the last 5-6 years, was it?
5 years.
So you thought, well, I'm going to stock up on my theatre count. You and I have been quite busy over the last 3 weeks, would you say?
Yes, you've been a wonderful enabler.
Thank you. She's a scientist, in case you couldn't tell. Wouldn't catalyst be the correct word?
That works.
We have been to see Phantom of the Opera. We talked about it in an episode ages ago. In no particular order, Wicked, Heathers, Bat Out of Hell, and Matilda. And tonight we are seeing a musical about a sci-fi convention, which we'll talk about in a bit. But let's start with Phantom. I did talk about with Antonia, and I enjoyed it very much. I still stand up and say it's a wonderful theatrical experience. As I said before, think what you want about the music, it still works, doesn't it?
And I think the music is wonderful. You're wrong about that, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, that's fine. It was still nice to see excellent theatre craft.
Yes, and that's the reason I love it. So it is my favourite musical, I think mostly for nostalgia reasons, because it was the first thing...
As it is for many people, because it's the first show they see.
Yeah, it was the first thing I saw on the West End that completely blew me away and said, this is what theatre can be. And it does still hold up.
Mm. How long ago was it since you last saw it, that particular production? Because I know you've seen arena shows and things and various... Love Never Dies and things. Love Never Dies.
Well, I went to almost every stop on the 25th anniversary tour, but the West End production, actually the last time I saw that was my last night in England before I moved abroad, so 5 years ago.
Do you think the world has changed in the last 5 or 6 years as regards some of the themes introduced in Phantom, do you think?
I mean, yes, it's one of those shows you can't think about the plot too much because it's about an older man grooming a young girl. It's a terrible story, but you just have
Better than Bat Out of Hell, though.
Everything is better than the story of Bat Out of Hell, insofar as it has one.
We should get on to that.
So yeah, it's not a story that necessarily holds up, but if you switch your brain off and take it for what it is, which is a fantasy, then it's wonderful.
Like Beauty and the Beast and Hunchback of Notre Dame in a way, they're all sort of linked to those stories, aren't they?
Yeah, it's all basically the same theme, isn't it? Which is ugly guys deserve love, but ugly women do not.
You once said to me your favourite moment in the whole of musical theatre canon is the overture of Phantom of the Opera, and I think visually that is correct, and we've said that many times on this show. So Phantom was a success, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
And then we went to see, I believe was it Matilda?
Matilda was the next one,
yes,
yeah.
Another long running.
Which was actually the first show we saw together.
Yes.
Some years ago.
Thousands of years ago when it first opened. It still stands up as excellent, doesn't it?
Oh yes, it's still wonderful.
We had someone new for Miss Trunchbull, whose name I don't know, I'm terribly sorry, but the girl playing Matilda, whose first name was Francesca, not sure of the second name, she was absolutely mesmerising in the fact that she looks about 1 foot tall on that stage, doesn't she? She probably isn't, but it's all a wonderful illusion. Such a difficult role.
Yeah, for being 1 foot tall, she absolutely holds your attention.
Yes.
She was brilliant.
And now you're a massive fan of Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
And Lord of the Rings and Matilda were directed by the same creative team, and I turned to you at the end of Matilda and said, could you tell it was directed by the same team? And you said yes, but you can't put your finger on as to why. Have you had a chance to think about that?
No, it's really difficult. It has a lot of the same very kind of oppressive, dark feel to it, while simultaneously having a lot of very light moments. That's not necessarily in the direction, so no, I can't put my finger on what it is.
Just wonderful. Tell me about your love for Lord of the Rings. You are a Lord... Is there
a ringer?
Is it a collective term for Lord of the Rings
we're
fan?
ringers.
Right.
I've been a Lord of the Rings fan basically my whole life. I read the book when I was 9, so that was only a few years ago.
That's why you relate to Matilda, isn't it? In a way?
Yes, absolutely. Lord of the Rings, of course, is one of the books that she has read that week in the show.
That whole list is a reference to previous shows that the RSC have done or that the creator team were involved in, by the way, which I think is quite funny.
Yeah. I think when I got the internet, Lord of the Rings was the first thing I was going to say Googled. Obviously, it wasn't Google then.
You Altavisted.
Yes. I asked
Dr.
Jeeves
Jeeves
or whatever. And I was just blown away. Oh, there are other people who've read this book. That was news to me because I was the only person I knew. Some years later, I became introduced to the Tolkien Society. I was their treasurer for some time, so that's the level of nerd we're talking about. I was their treasurer when the musical opened, which is how I got to see it on press night. And I saw it in total 42 times.
Even though it's only open 41 nights.
Yeah, that's not nice. It was open for a year, and I paid for all but one of them.
Well done. And now you have no money left.
And I have no money.
Could the show return, do you think? I mean, there's always...
No.
It was always it's going to be a stadium show, and it's going to go to Canada, and it's going to... Well, it came from Canada, didn't it, originally?
It would need to be reworked. Obviously, I loved it, but I think the problem is it's not a mainstream musical. It doesn't have a lot of big, catchy songs. But the reason I loved it is it feels like Tolkien in a way that even the movies don't, and I do love the movies as well.
And the same way Matilda feels like Roald Dahl, they really were able to tap into
absolutely.
the creative... The author of the piece. Maybe that's why you think the two are so similar, because they're so faithful to the source material.
Yeah, possibly. And it's weird to say that Lord of the Rings, the musical, is faithful to the source material, because of course it takes enormous liberties with the plot. But ignoring the plot, the fact that they condensed 2 entire countries into one, you have to do that if you're going to tell the story in 2.5 hours.
And cut battles and chapters and things, apparently.
But, they're kind of repetitive, so that's fine. The thing that really comes through is that the themes are all there. And also the way the music is used. The music in the original book it doesn't add to the story the way it should in a musical. It is just there for background and atmosphere.
It's diegetic.
Which is mostly how it's used in the musical. There are some traditional musical numbers, but a lot of it is...
The Gay Love Song, for example.
The Gay Love Song, which is my favourite.
Now and for Always.
Yes.
And The Road Goes On is also a very musically, theatre-y song.
Yeah, and also things like The Road Goes On and the song he sings in the bar about the cat and the moon and I forget what it's called. May well be The Cat and the Moon. There we go. They're not the same as the songs in the book, but they are very, very much based on and have a lot of lyrics in common with the songs in the book. So that helps it feel a lot more like Tolkien.
The film didn't have songs, though, which was interesting. Or maybe they did Enya do some elvish warbling?
Yeah, obviously they have songs over the credits. I'm not sure it would have worked in the film, because the film, although I like it visually, it doesn't have that feel that the book has of... it's an action film. It's not taking place within a world that has the depth and history that it does in the book. And I think if they had made the film the way the story happens in the book, it would have slowed the plot down a lot. They would have been, we've got this urgent mission we have to do right now, but we're just going to sit around the fire for a bit and sing a song about these people who've been dead for thousands of years. It wouldn't have worked in a film.
Tell us about where you just come back from.
Oh, well, I've been living in Australia for the last year, and so on my way back to England, it was a little bit of a diversion. I went to New Zealand for 2 weeks. And as one does, and visited every possible location that I could from Lord of the Rings. Good. Which was pretty wonderful. I'm wearing my kiwi earrings right now.
Very nice. So that was Matilda via Lord of the Rings. Right. I just thought it was an interesting comparison, and as you're such a fan of it, it's nice to chat about that show for the first time in 10 years. We also then went to see, was it Heather's, the next experience we had?
Which was completely new to me. I had seen the film, but so long ago that I remembered nothing from it. I had no expectations of the musical, but it was great. Because
I saw the show when it was at the other palace, and it was incredibly new to me because I'd never seen the film, so I had no idea what it was about, apart from the fact it had some people in it called Heather. That was all I was able to grab from the title. And this is an incredibly dark musical, isn't it?
It really is, and it takes the sort of bubbly high school thing and the darkness that is there in a lot of high school comedies and just really runs with it.
Like Buffy did.
Indeed, yeah. Buffy did it through allegory.
Yeah.
Heather's just takes everything super literally and deals with incredibly big dark issues and just smacks you over the head with them.
Stars Carrie Hope Fletcher, who's very good in an incredibly difficult role, isn't it? But it's the guy that always shocks me. He does, spoilers, I feel his journey is a bit predictable because you immediately see him and you think, oh, he's a psychotic weirdo.
It is spot the creepy weirdo.
Yes, with the trench coat on and the brooding eyes. But
And he's lit so that he looks even more pale and gaunt. Yeah.
He still gives a magnificent performance, but you can tell it's written by the same composer, at least, that did Legally Blonde, can't you?
Oh, you can, absolutely. One thing I think is really interesting is we were talking about how the story of Phantom of the Opera is held up or not. Obviously, there are themes in Heathers that very much haven't really held up. And
Heathers is an 80s film.
Yeah, it was 1989. The musical's off-Broadway, 2013, 14? Right. And they've made changes even since then to deal with things like date rape in more effective ways. And as we've already discussed, I particularly love the new song, which is... I'm a sucker for the melodramatic female empowerment ballads. And there's a moment where she just turns around to Creepy Dude and says, "Screw you, I'm saying no." I think that's the name of the song, actually. I Say No.
Not screw you, then.
It should be.
A nice pun, play on the word, screw you.
And the lyrics are all about how, she recognises this relationship is toxic, she's not qualified to deal with his issues, and it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
And that was a new thing they added for the London show, because it was kind of workshopped at the other palace, and very successfully, I might add.
Oh yeah, it was the standout number in the show for me.
Some of the songs are very similar to Legally Blonde. For example, the first song the chap has, and I don't have a programme on me, I'm terribly sorry,
Freeze Your Brain.
Yes, Freeze Your Brain, where he sings about his upbringing, and you're thinking, oh, this is exactly the same as Chip on My Shoulder from Legally Blonde.
It is.
But maybe it's an in-joke, I don't know, or something like that, but it's even the instrumentations and the chord patterns and stuff, but his music is excellent. Don't go, I mean, you won't see it because it's closed now, but if it returns, don't go expecting a complete evening of doom and gloom. They are able to make funny out of some quite dark situations, which is, I consider this piece a black comedy piece, like the funeral song, for example, which was a highlight for many.
Yeah, that is a lot of fun.
But any musical that has a song in it called My Dead Gay Son is wonderful. And you were saying the tall blonde Heather was your favourite. She stood out to you.
Yes, and I think that's true in the movie as well, that her role is a lot of fun, especially, spoiler, as a ghost.
Is she a ghost in the film as well? Or have you not watched the film?
Oh, I haven't seen it recently enough. I think so.
Right, so she's a kind of Jiminy Cricket character.
She has some brilliant lines, and it's really...
like, fuck me sideways with a chainsaw, which is one of my favourite lines ever.
I don't know if mocking is the right word, but it's highlighting the way suicide can be glamorised and can seem appealing.
And especially nowadays, I think that has with social media and stuff, it does have the show doesn't mention that, because I like the way the show's not really set in any time period. There's no mention of social media in this piece or anything like that. With people glamorising social media and even things like anorexia online, it's not. It's a good show to have brought back, I think.
Yeah, it's remained very relevant.
And speaking of relevance, we then went to see Wicked, which is still. It was a very long day, wasn't it? Which is still a wonderful piece of theatre, isn't it?
Oh yes, it's the current cast is brilliant.
Yes.
It's still almost perfect theatre.
We had Alice Fern as Elphaba, who has a very, very rich tone to her voice, and I loved how sarcastic she made the role. She didn't do the low E in I'm Not That Girl, which I'm now over, but it jarred me.
You were very upset about that.
I know, because it represents her lowest point.
Yes, I agree.
And the D flat and defying gravity. Never mind. I've always felt Fiyero is a thankless role in this musical. I know spoiler, if you haven't seen Wicked, I know he serves the point of, everything he says is all about that was empty-headed, that was brainless, that was etc. So it's always leading to him being the scarecrow, and I love that, the reason for him existing. But it did seem quite dated, some of it, didn't it? Though?
Yeah, that was my comment coming out of it, because I hadn't seen Wicked in a number of years, and the whole love triangle story does come across as quite dated now, I think. And I think most people just see this as it's a story about the female friendship, and I think these days you would just make that story and not have to throw a love interest in.
When I saw Frozen, it felt very much like Wicked
the musical.
Yeah, not the musical, but when I saw Frozen the film, it felt like it was doing the same thing that Wicked did by having a strong female what is essentially a romance, but
Yeah.
it's not. Platonic love story, you could say, and the two villains sort of in Frozen or whatever he is, the men interfering in a way. It's not about a love story between them, it's about friendship, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not that into the two women fighting over a man.
Or shoes.
Or shoes. Do they fight over shoes?
Well, doesn't she say get over it, it's just a pair of shoes?
Oh, those shoes.
Yes.
Oh, those are different.
They're slippers, in fact.
She does have a point. Who steals a dead woman's shoes?
Yes, unlike magic wands. I put on Twitter that I think the end of Act 1 is the most iconic musical theatre moment of the last 20 years, I would say, which is Defying Gravity. And my dear friend and colleague from the podcast, Thos, replied and said, no, he thinks Chitty Chitty Bang Bang is a more impressive musical theatre moment, which is true, but what I meant was that it's much more parodied, referenced, incredibly powerful. Everything comes to a wonderful point in that moment. The lighting, the music, the effect. Not the effect is that amazing. We had that effect in Joseph. And it's the issue I've always had with Wicked is I want more magic in it. For a show that's so magical,
yeah.
all we have is a floating broomstick, a wheelchair that didn't work the night we saw it, and Elphaba standing on a forklift and being raised up 15 feet in the air.
That was actually really funny. Everyone reacting like, what did you just do? And we're like, she didn't do anything. She was wheeling her own chair. We could see it.
But it was controlled by her mind.
Right.
Yeah, so we didn't have the remote control wheelchair effect that night. And there was no puff of smoke from the cage, which was a shame. So I think the special effects
I
person
actually didn't miss that.
was off that night.
Yeah.
But Wicked still packing it out on a Saturday afternoon. And we got a lovely behind-the-scenes tour afterwards, didn't we? Which was very nice. Thanks to my friend Nikki in the orchestra. You like costumes, don't you? Which is something we've never talked about on this podcast. Express your appreciation for costumes.
Yeah, well, I'm very much into cosplay, and I have to say that the costumes in Wicked, they've got to be the best costumes in theatre at the moment.
Better than Phantom?
Yeah, I think so.
Why?
Well, no, Phantom is also very good. Phantom is very elaborate.
Wicked has its own, as I say, Wicked has its own style, whereas Phantom is just copying clothes from an era,
Yeah.
I would think. Whereas this is completely, is it now?
Yeah.
Is it Victorian?
If
Is it?
you saw one of those costumes, you would immediately say, oh, that's Wicked. And I think that's incredible. I
This is
love
green.
the weird asymmetric styles. Obviously the fabrics, the green. I think they're brilliant. I also really like the black and white ones in the dance club scene. They're pretty cool too.
I love the way, I completely forgot how Elphaba builds into her, how we know her as the Wicked Witch, so getting the hat at the party and things, and getting, the cloak that she gets before she defies gravity, and she really does become this character. Doesn't have the big nose though, which is a shame.
Oh no, but she's beautiful.
She is. She's tragically beautiful all over the lines. I do love the whole thing about the Cold War reference with you have to give them an enemy to bring a country together. We believe all sorts of things that aren't true. I come from, we call it history. And that whole song is wonderful. Literally, I still think it stands up really well.
Yeah, this is one of those stories that's only become more relevant. The whole idea of the scapegoat. Bad things are happening, so we're going to pick someone to blame. It's usually poor people and immigrants. Yeah, that's sadly something that's even more relevant now than it was in 2003.
Can you believe it's been 15 years that Wicked has been...
No, I'm not that old.
Yes, I was 5 when I found it as well.
Yes, dear.
So tonight we are seeing something rather unique.
You skipped one.
Have I? Oh yes,
My favourite.
I can't think why. We've also seen Bat Out of Hell for the third time for me, and last, I will say, and second time for you.
Second time for me, and I'm going to fit in as many as I possibly can before it closes.
Do you love it?
Love is a strong word.
Did you love it less the second time you saw it?
Possibly, yes. Because the first time, I'm a huge fan of the music. And
We have to say this is a Jim Steinman jukebox musical.
Should we argue over whether it's a jukebox musical?
I think we should argue over whether it's a thing at all, really.
It was written to be a musical, astoundingly.
Well,
so I don't think it
as a
necessarily
concept
qualifies.
album in whenever it was, the 70s or 80s. and it's in 3 parts, I think. And Jim Steinman, that famous dramaturg and storyteller, decided to actually put his creation on stage through a series of mind-bending drugs. It can only be my assumption as to how this piece was written. He writes songs very well. He writes music very well. Yes, it all sounds like a Jim Steinman song. His dialogue is... It's like if you take a great song and you take away the music.
I'm sorry, I've got to take issue with that.
Come on.
There's no dialogue in that show. That is not how anyone talks.
He's using songwriting style of sentences, but he's taking away the music. So he's using very grandiose phrases. Like, what's that stupid thing about the sun is reflecting the sky?
And the sea, and nothing will ever happen. I don't know.
That could be in a song, and you would accept it.
Right.
But put it in a normal dialogue situation.
So maybe it's being really meta and talking about how if you actually use song lyrics in real life, you sound like a moron.
Is this real life? Is this just fantasy?
I don't know. I find that show really frustrating because I do love the music so very much. But I think on the second time of seeing it, I was hoping I would understand the plot better, and I came away with the conclusion that there is no plot.
Some would say that there is the Peter Pan element in there, which is the fact we have a character called Tink who is very camp, dare I say, and he does die. Spoilers. We don't have to clap our hands to bring him back to life, though. And there is the evil father who is kind of could be seen as this kind of Captain Hook-esque character, and there is what's her name? Fierce, or the girl Raven, who can be seen as Wendy, and she discovers this lost boy or member of the Lost called Strat, who keeps entering tower flat through the window.
Yeah, so it's got a little bit of a Sleeping Beauty thing going on there as well. I don't get the Peter Pan thing, because there's this whole setup, which they used to provide you with a newspaper on the seat. I guess cost-cutting measures, they don't do that anymore. Where they set up this background that there was some kind of chemical war thing, and all the kids get to 18 and then they stop aging, and so these Lost get to 18 and then they never age. And this is
great,
reference does sound wonderful. I don't know, not 18, maybe 25.
Okay, all right.
So this is mentioned a couple of times in the show, and like they briefly at the end reference that this is going to make a relationship between someone who's going to be 18 forever and someone who's aging normally a little tricky, but other than that it has no bearing on the plot whatsoever.
People just leave and come back and then have a song to sing about the 7-minute song about their feelings. I
complained about this before, but the second couple,
the musical comedy couple,
who are the third couple. The parents are my favourites.
Right, yes. Sorry.
Was the other couple, the one who's
the
posing
nurse
as the nurse,
and the other one.
Yeah, this is how memorable these characters are.
These characters have no names.
They are wonderful performers.
Yes,
but their story makes no sense. The first time you meet them, they're singing 2 Out of 3 Ain't Bad, which is a breakup song. And then later on, they're singing Dead Ringer for Love, which is about the first time you meet someone. So I don't understand.
It just shows the importance of, yes, if you want to do a jukebox musical, there is a real craft behind it. You cannot just write nonsense. I'm sure someone knows what this story is about. I'm sure Jim Simon, if he were here, he would happily defend his wonderful creation for hours on end, or even the director of the piece would. But if it's confusing the audience, you haven't done your job properly. Now, there is certainly room for analytical discussion within the piece, but are the audience there for a story?
No, the audience, I mean, we had someone behind us complaining that she wasn't allowed to sing along. That's what people are there for. They're there for the music, which is what I hate about jukebox musicals. It's just unfortunate. This is one where I really love the music. And seeing it performed by people who can actually sing, so not Meatloaf, is wonderful. That's why I go. That's why I'm going to keep going as many times as I can before it closes.
But couldn't you just flash a light in your face and listen to the cast recording without the dialogue? And have a much better evening.
It's not the same. You know it's not the same. And honestly, the entire ticket price is worth it just for Paradise by the Dashboard Light.
Yes. And by the entire ticket price, we mean the £20 seats that we got on Todaytix. Whilst it has moments of spectacle, this is another thing I want to talk about. There's one element which is utterly confusing to me, and I think when she started talking about mirrors being all around her, I think I got as to why they film a lot of the show and project it around the cast. Other than the fact that this theatre is so big, you probably struggle to see a lot of it. But it's just bizarre, some of it. I mean, you are watching a screen for majority of the piece, aren't you?
Yeah, and I sort of understand the way the set is set up. She has a bedroom like up on one side on one wall, and it has a screen in front of it for a lot of the time, so it's difficult to see what's going on. But they have a camera person in there filming, and so you end up watching the screen.
Like MTV Cribs, My Sweet
Right.
16 style.
But then it gets
camera.
really confusing when her bedroom takes up the entire stage, and so you can see her perfectly well, but they're still filming and just projecting like on top of her onto the wall. So you think there's some meaning.
Now, there was a scene in that bedroom where she was put to sleep. My theory is, and it's highly unoriginal from both the point of view of the person creating it and mine looking at it, is the whole thing is a dream, because it is so ridiculous. And she is put to sleep, and she's given dream, or is she? She's given dream suppressants. I don't know. I think we have to wait for Bat Out of Hell Never Dies. Just to give us the real reasoning as to what actually happened in this piece.
There's also the thing of everyone breaks up for completely legitimate reasons, and then there's a 6-month time jump, and then they're all singing "It's All Coming Back to Me Now," and you're like, no, you broke up for completely legitimate reasons. What are you doing back here?
It's all a dream.
Maybe it was
And
all a
I
dream.
love how the mum just disappears for 6 months and just wanders
I
around.
think she just walks around the city for 6 months.
Talk about endings, I want to go back to Heathers. The one issue I have with the piece is Heathers, as we said, is a very, very dark comic piece. But it does that American thing of let's tag a happy ending on and say we're all friends. You're not all friends. You just tried to kill each other and stuff, and suicide. And would you be disappointed if the evening just ended with the thing that the main character wants to do?
I understand why it's there. I mean, it is American, although Matilda tacks on a saccharine happy ending as well.
Yeah, but that's not the theatre show's fault. That's
No,
the
that's
story.
in the book, yeah. I think in Heathers there are loose ends that need to be wrapped up. You know, she starts off with this friend who is decidedly not one of the cool kids, and she is horrible to her. And so I think you need to resolve that at the end.
Heathers
and
never
have her-
die. That'll be
right. She needs to make amends with that friend because she has been awful to her. And Veronica, the main character, is complicit in a lot of really awful stuff that she gets away with because we like her, whereas we don't like the creepy guy, and it's easy to push all the blame onto him.
I'd like to see the film and see if that has the happy ending, because I wonder how much of it is the stage show and how the film ends.
I liked it. There is a line, and I've seen this musical exactly one time, so I don't remember the line exactly. But it's when the not cool kid is talking about renting videos, and she says she wants something with a happy ending, and one of them says, "Is there such a thing as a happy ending?" And I think that's a direct reference to the ending.
Possibly.
They have a happy ending. I mean, it's not a happy ending. There are people who are dead.
Yeah. Well, they'll come back, because it's a musical, and they did come back and take a bow, and everyone was happy. I preempted our event tonight, and we are going to see a musical. I'm absolutely bewildered about this tonight, set in a science fiction convention, which is your entire life wrapped up in a musical, isn't it, Rachel?
Yes, basically. I've both run and attended many a science fiction convention. It could be either brilliant or abysmal.
Might this be a show you walk out of? That'll be my first question.
I have only ever walked out of one show, so we will see.
Musical Talk.
So we have traversed the sands of time, and it's now a couple of weeks later. We've done something on a y-axis and something on an x-axis, I guess. I don't know.
Was that your attempt to remember me explaining space-time to you?
Yes. A couple of seconds ago, we were about to go and see Fanatical, which is a musical that you and I were incredibly curious about.
Yeah, I would say dubious. Because it was a musical based on a science fiction convention. Those are my two main passions, so it had plenty of opportunity to offend on both fronts.
But it didn't, did it?
No, I loved it.
So much so you've since seen it again.
Yes, I had to go back and take one of my science fiction friends.
It was at the Playground Theatre, which is a beautiful venue, not in a great location, but if you're prepared to make the trip like we were, it's absolutely fine. Not a theatre, is it? It's a room with seats, is what I call it.
Basically, yeah.
It's more fresh in your mind, Rachel, so I'm going to let you wax lyrical about it. With perfect rhyming, please. Off you go.
The thing I really enjoyed about it is I've seen many things that have tried to be about science fiction fans, and they're either openly mocking or they're not consciously mocking, but they just get it wrong. And this does neither of those things.
It's perfect on the X and Y axes, isn't
it? It was a really fun musical, first of all, so you enjoyed it without knowing anything about science fiction conventions. With the added layer of getting all the science fiction references and the references to fandom and con organising. Many of us have spent our savings running science fiction conventions. There was a reference to chemical burns from making detailed cosplays, which I think many of us have experienced.
What was the song I liked the most? The one about relationships that shouldn't be...
Oh, about Slash.
Slash, that's it. It didn't parody the convention of conventions, but it referenced lots of things. That's the song that you could take out of context, I think, and have it be like a standalone, that
would be the breakaway pop hit,
yes.
You think?
The story, from what I remember, is it is about a convention. They've lost the final episode of a TV series.
No, the final episode hasn't aired yet.
Yes.
And the creator of this show is supposed to be the keynote speaker at this convention. He's nowhere to be found, so the organizer of the convention is trying to keep a lot of plates spinning while not letting anyone find out that their keynote speaker isn't there yet.
Have you been there?
Oh, yes.
Yes?
No, what I did was run a Harry Potter convention the weekend that the final book was released, and was trying not to let people know that our books hadn't been delivered yet. It all worked out, it was fine. And I won't spoil it, but he does show up at the end of Act 1.
He does, and I recognise him. He was Simon Frost, I believe is his name. He was also in very, very early episodes of Whose Line Is It Anyway in England, and he's a very, very good improviser. A nice surprise we had at the end of the musical, when Rachel and I went, was that there was a Q&A given by Terry Paddock afterwards, which was really interesting, and you've since worked out that there's some quite interesting links in your life and the people involved in this musical.
Oh yeah, so I only realised after seeing it the second time that I know the woman who wrote the book, Raina Hardy. She writes a lot of plays that have science in them, which I guess is why I shouldn't have been worried about this. It is very positive about fans. She wrote a play several years ago about an astronomer, and we were both living in Austin, Texas, and I was an astrophysicist at the University of Texas, so she had me come in to do a Q&A after the play. So yeah, it turns out I've known her for years, and I only realised, I knew the name was ringing a bell, but there's lots of names in theatre that crop up over and over again. I only realised after seeing it the second time that, I know who that is.
But also the woman who played the event organiser, who played you.
Oh yeah, she has the one who was playing me. She's even a redhead. Yeah, she has some good sci-fi credentials. Most famously, she was Hathor in Stargate SG-1. And she was, I think she was the star of the show for me. She was fantastic.
And what did you enjoy more the second time you saw it? Or not enjoy more? The
second time, I got more of the references, because I wasn't having to concentrate on what the plot was. So there are a lot of little offhand science fiction and fantasy references, which are really fun. But coming back to the breakaway pop hit that you liked, that's actually, it was my favourite song too, but I do actually have a little bit of an issue with it.
Okay.
And this is something that made me think maybe not everyone involved with this is as embedded in fandom.
Is this the first time you saw it?
The song is called Me/You, and it's a male character trying to convince a woman to go out with him unsuccessfully, and it uses a lot of fandom references and references to slash fiction, which is fan fiction that pairs characters together. Traditionally in fandom, slash refers specifically to homosexual pairings.
Okay.
And there is a reference in the song to love not knowing boundaries of gender, race, or species. But this is a white man hitting on a white woman. They're both human. It's extremely heteronormative.
Do you think they were just using it as an excuse to do a song about it?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I didn't know that, so it still worked for a muggle in the audience to use a term.
It was confusing terminology to throw in there, and I think it might have worked better if he was hitting on one of the male characters, maybe.
But the music and lyrics generally were excellent, and the Q&A afterwards, you could tell the composer, whose name I can't remember, was heavily influenced by Thy Lord Sondheim, and why shouldn't he be?
Except this one has melodies in it.
It does, as does Sondheim, Rachael, and the lyrics were excellent. The TV show they were all there celebrating had its own theme tune, which came back, which was quite nice. The lead girl was very, very good, and it's a very, very sweet story. And what it does, which you and I loved, is it celebrates fandom, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not at all mocking. It's very positive about fans and about fan creativity and how fandom is a way of expressing creativity through a shared love for something, and it's about the community of fandom. And it's nice that even the cynical characters are won over by the end, spoiler alert.
I think the reason, as I said, I liked the Slash song is that it referenced things that everyone knows, and the issue the show could have is that it's built its own sci-fi show, hasn't it? Do you think it would be better if we lived in a world without copyright permissions and they could use Star Trek characters and they could do their own episode of Star Trek and musicalise that and things? Or did you mind the fact they created their own world?
I think it was nice that it was a fictional world because, I mean, it means you can bring in the creator and you're not hurting anyone by doing that. It does mean, I mean, that Slash song is a little strange because he references famous couples in science fiction like Kirk and Spock and Frodo and Sam, and that's not what you would do if you were hitting on someone in the same fandom as you. You would reference something within that fandom, but of course that would mean nothing to the audience. So yeah, I guess it's a little odd that they go through all these science fiction fantasy references but not the fandom that they're at a convention for.
But then, as you say, it would make
exactly.
It wouldn't be a standout song.
Yeah.
Your friend Fiona, what did she think?
Oh yes, I went with my friend Fiona the second time, who is a fellow science fiction convention organizer, and she also loved it. She was grinning from start to finish.
Did you tell her anything about it beforehand? Were her thoughts the same as yours?
I think pretty much, yes. I told her the basic premise, and that I may have spoiled the ending a bit because I said that it was very positive about fandom, so she kind of knew where it was going and wasn't worried. So she probably enjoyed it more openly than I did the first time through when I was a little bit cautious.
There is news of a cast recording, which is quite exciting.
Yes, Raina tells me that they did raise enough money for a cast recording, so I hope that will come out, and then people who didn't get to see it in its very short run will understand what we're talking about.
You brought up the fact that this should be at sci-fi conventions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a shame it was such a short run because I didn't get to spread the word within my science fiction convention running friends as much as I would have liked. But it should absolutely be performed at conventions, and I hope one day it will be. I liked that the music was very catchy. As you know, I like a nice melody.
We all like a nice melody, yes.
I like something that's going to be stuck in my head for weeks afterwards.
Do you think it's stuck in your head because you've seen it twice? Because none of them stuck in my head beyond seeing it. I remember enjoying the songs at the time. A song is only catchy if you hear it enough.
I got fragments stuck in my head after seeing it the first time, which is why I had to go back a second time, because there's nothing more annoying than having a song stuck in your head when you don't know it very well. So I did go back a second time, and then, it got even more firmly wedged in. So one thing that I did not get, that I only learned by reading up on it afterwards, because it is a very small cast, and obviously you're very close to the stage in a small venue like that, so all of the cast are extremely recognisable. And I did not get that some of the ensemble were playing multiple characters. I thought they were the same character who had dramatic personality changes at various points during the show.
Just highly autistic.
So once I realised that, it made a lot more sense. I don't really know how you get around that because, in hindsight, maybe I was just being dumb. They do change costume. They probably changed names, but I was not keeping up with all the names, so I had not realised they were different characters.
Doesn't matter though. You still get the journey of the main character.
Yeah, all of the main characters have very clear, defined arcs.
One thing that I remember coming back to me, it's all coming back to me now, we'll get on to that later, was the very sudden romance that blossoms between the lead girl and this reporter that turns up. Sorry, plot twist. And this mysterious man that turns up.
Yeah. Yeah, as you know, I always find these things tedious. So the main character is supposed to be something of an introvert who goes to conventions in cosplay as a way of coming out of her introvertedness, which obviously I relate to very much because I do exactly the same thing.
She's dressed as a Borg right now. Do I mean a Borg? Or was that a cube?
I have no idea how to take that.
Okay.
I'm dressed perfectly normally, thank you very
Roll
much.
your eyes as
I am
usual.
wearing a Star Trek dress though.
See, I'm correct. Borg again, that's the...
You made me lose my train of thought. Okay, so she shows up in a very skin-tight outfit, not the kind of thing I would wear. And this guy is obviously very interested. And so I think she is supposed to be very young, I think.
Yes, and he comes across as much older as well.
He does, which is a little bit disturbing. And I think she's just really unused to the attention. I don't know what
Would she be, though? Is this her first convention, do we think?
I don't know. Her friends seem like they haven't seen her dressed like that before. So I don't know. You'd have to ask the writer. And I don't know what the intention of the writer was, but my headcanon was that romance doesn't outlast the show. And though that character, the male character, is extremely obnoxious for most of the show, intentionally, but he does kind of become redeemed and comes out with one of my favourite lines, the amazing pearl of wisdom that women are people, which is... I think that made me have less of an issue with that whole subplot than I might.
Do you think seeing it again helped you understand things like that?
Yes. I always need to see things a second time, or
85 times.
Yeah, in the case of Phantom of the Opera, 85 times. Because, the first time you're just trying to keep track of who everyone is and what's happening, and the second time you can relax a bit and see how it fits together a bit more.
Which time did you enjoy more? Be careful how you answer this question.
The time I didn't go with you, obviously. I think I enjoyed both. The first time, it was a really pleasant surprise because I hadn't heard about this show from anyone other than you, and I had very low expectations, and so it was a huge step up from what I expected going in.
Because you were laughing on the third line of the musical.
Oh right, yeah. I think it was right at the beginning when she's talking about her chemical burns from her cosplay, and I was like, yep,
done.
This person gets me.
So that was Fanatical. We look forward to witnessing the show making its journey. I hope its intergalactic stellar journey. I'm trying. Stop rolling your eyes.
Don't make space metaphors.
I want to talk about from one musical that could have been a load of nonsense to a musical that literally is probably a load of nonsense to a lot of people, and that's Tanz Der Vampire, which you have also seen.
Which we have been arguing about for years.
Only because my thoughts on it are based on ignorance.
Well, I think this is true of basically the entire English-speaking theatre world, and also everything you say, yes. So, Tanz Der Vampire is a Jim Steinman musical that has plot.
Okay, so it's immediately better than Bat Out of Hell.
Right, presumably he didn't write the book. I don't know.
Well, he wrote the English version of the book with an American playwright.
Right, but so this is where the problem comes in. If you speak to an English-speaking theatre fan, they know it as Dance of the Vampires, which had an extremely ill-fated run on Broadway in early 2000s, like 2002 or so.
We'll get onto that in a bit.
It was awful. When you talk about Tanz Der Vampire, the German original musical, people associate it with that and think, oh, well, Germans must have appalling taste in musicals if it's so popular over there. But it is a completely different musical. The Broadway one was not a direct translation. The original is very much like Phantom of the Opera with vampires.
Okay.
It is, this older, very sophisticated guy vampire, in this case, seducing a younger woman who's had a very sheltered life.
But we've since established that is a very European story, because it's essentially every French story ever written.
It's basically, Beauty and the Beast yet again.
Hunchback and everything.
Yeah.
So do you think that story works better in a Europe sense?
Well, no, because I think other interpretations of that same story have done well in America.
Horror in musical theatre is very hard to do seriously.
I think it does have a problem. The humour is very German. And I think in German you can get away with having very silly slapstick humour and then launching into an extremely sincere rock ballad, and it works. Whereas you try to do that for the British or the Americans and people will laugh, which is what happened on Broadway. But no, the worst thing on Broadway was they decided, since the lead vampire guy is basically the Phantom, they got Michael Crawford to make his Broadway comeback with this show, but he said, I don't want to play the Phantom again. So they completely rewrote it, made it a straightforward comedy, but it still has Jim Steinman music. So it goes from even more ridiculous, and he's doing this horrendous Italian accent. I don't know why he's Italian, he's supposed to be from Transylvania.
European.
I guess
for Americans. Sorry, Americans.
And it's just awful. Everything about it is awful.
Everything. And
you
saw it on Broadway?
No redeeming features. I've seen a bootleg of the Broadway one.
Okay.
Luckily, I never spent any money on it. Am I allowed to say that?
You say what you want.
But no, the original German one is... it is what it is. It is very 80s, even though it opened in the 90s. But it's Jim Steinman rock music, and unlike Bad Out of Hell, it has a plot that kind of makes sense. Even with I understand probably half of the words.
So
my German isn't perfect.
What would you say the story is?
There's a young girl whose father keeps her locked in because he's afraid of men coming and taking her away.
I'm talking about the plot for Tanz Der Vampire, not Bat Out of... Oh, okay.
It is.
That's right, it's the same plot.
So far it's the same. This professor who's investigating vampires shows up, and the local townspeople deny any knowledge of vampires despite all walking around with garlic around their necks. And he brings with him an assistant who immediately falls for this girl. So he's the appropriate love interest, the Rachael character. But in the meantime, she gets seduced by this older vampire and runs away to go to his vampire castle, and shenanigans ensue. So it is essentially Phantom of the Opera, with elements of Bad Out of Hell, except with linear plot and character arcs.
So it's Dance of the Vampire, Bat Out of Hell. Which...
and it does have actually it's not just similar music, it is some identical music.
Yes, because the song you sent me to listen to, and I said, have I heard this before? And you said...
Yes, you have. It's the best song, I think, in Tanz. It's called Unstillbare Gier in the German version, which translates to Insatiable Appetite, which unfortunately in the Broadway edition they translated literally, and as we discussed, that's not a song lyric. But the melody was reused, or maybe vice versa, it's unclear, as Objects in the Rearview Mirror, which made its way into Bad Out of Hell. There's also some incidental music in Tanz, which I only noticed this time round. This was my second time seeing it, which shows up in Bad Out of Hell as the first song between the parents, the one bitching about the young people.
Oh, that weird jazzy number that stands out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, it was on a Meatloaf album in 2016, which is why no one's heard of it, because Meatloaf has not been able to sing for longer than that. But yes, it was the music was actually in Tanz Der Vampire.
So you went to Germany recently to see this show and have some Christmas market fun. How long had it been since you last saw a production of it?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to say 7 or 8 years.
Big show? Was it everything you wanted?
Yeah,
or?
I mean, it was in the biggest theatre in Berlin. It was not sold out, but it was a Sunday afternoon.
Right.
In fact, it was mostly empty, but still gets a very enthusiastic reception.
How do you... Just to go on a tangent, how do you feel sitting in half-empty / half-full theatres watching musicals?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about it, because on the one hand, it makes me sad, because, I feel bad for people performing to a half-empty house, and also the atmosphere is lacking if the place is half-empty. On the other hand, I have extremely strong opinions about behaviour in the theatre, and if the theatre's half empty, it reduces the possibility of someone talking or rustling loudly in proximity. So
because we saw Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night Time last night, and it was moderately full, I would say, and it was lovely. There were two very loud, obnoxious Americans next to us who were sipping gin and eating popcorn and crisps.
Which I was fine with the gin, but the popcorn...
Well, the ice got a bit annoying.
So loud.
Plus, it wasn't in your ear.
Right, okay.
But we moved, and it was... In a play, you don't mind, because in a play, you have 2 moments of... Unless it's a comedy, you have 2 moments of appreciation, which is the end of the first act and the end of the second act. But in a musical, you often have... you applaud after each number, And then you possibly have the bit where you have to stand at the end and dance. In the half-empty theatre, that you feel more I feel self-conscious when I have to stand up and dance anyway, but you feel more self-conscious because there's only 8 people doing it in your row of 50 seats.
And it's always a bit awkward that they're going to go ahead and do their, get up on your feet and dance, even though the place is half empty, and everyone, especially in England, everyone looks a bit awkward and unwilling to participate.
The second time I saw Bat Out of Hell, the theatre was like that. Mm-hmm. And now you can see why, with the wonderful plot it has. But
I still love it.
I know you do. But Tanz Der Vampire was comfortably full for you?
No. It was mostly empty, which was unfortunate, but because I'd booked fairly last minute, it was handy.
Is it scary? Because I want it to be scary. I'd want it to be...
No, it's too camp to be scary. I don't do horror at all.
So do you think the American production looked at it and thought, this is camp, let's make it... I'm just trying to think what went through the mind of the American audience to want to change it for Broadway, apart from Michael Crawford saying, I'm not going to play the Phantom, even though he's a vampire.
Yeah, everything I've read suggests that everyone pins the blame entirely on Michael Crawford, and that can only be half true, right? Because after he said, I'm not playing the Phantom again, you should look at the show you're trying to produce and say, this character is basically the Phantom, maybe we should hire a different actor.
Yeah.
So it was someone's decision to go ahead with it anyway and decide to drastically rewrite the show, which has been extremely successful in the German-speaking world.
But in America, it was a massive flop, wasn't it?
It was a huge flop, yeah. And it's just... it's awful and awkward. And you can see that it's just... American audiences even are not... The humour doesn't work as well. First of all, the humour is even more ridiculous than the German one. It's... there was... something I read that they wanted like 15 jokes per page or something stupid, and they are extremely puerile jokes and very, very silly, and then you go from that into your extremely earnest rock ballad and people start laughing.
I guess if you take Young Frankenstein as an example, which arguably has the best joke writer in Hollywood, his script, which is Mel Brooks, and then you put a yearning ballad in, it's done purely for comedic effect, whereas the German production sounds like, yes, we like yearning ballad, we want more yearning ballad.
I mean, and that is exactly my taste. I like the earliest melodramatic rock ballad. I'm more with the Germans, I think. There's also plot elements that they included in the Broadway version, even though the background had been cut. So there's a very silly thing in the German version is the girl really likes taking baths and she takes her sponge everywhere. And in the Broadway version, they have the sponge, but they've taken away the bath thing. So there are just sponges for absolutely no reason. It's like that level of attention to detail, or lack thereof, it's really frustrating.
You wonder what power Jim Steinman had over this production.
I believe he took his name off it.
Okay.
It was... I don't think they were under any illusions that it was good, even before it opened.
And it's a shame, because he's a wonderful writer of one kind of music.
Right. And the music's fantastic, with the German lyrics, which are not by Jim Steinman.
Because Rachael will, sit me down and say, listen to this song, it's wonderful. And I don't understand what the words are saying. So my argument is it's a nice tune, but I don't know what the dramatic context of this song is. And then I believe you said, Rachael, there's a version you can watch with subtitles. I said, I can't watch a show with subtitles in German and look at what's happening.
Do you never watch opera?
No. That's why I do a musical theatre podcast. How would it play here? Because I think we have the mixture of the American style with the European... I don't want to say intelligence because that's not true, but we're somewhere in the middle, aren't we? Not for much longer. But
I think the German version, translated, obviously, should play well here, I think.
Has it ever played here, to your knowledge?
No.
If it did, you'd know about it, wouldn't you?
Yes, absolutely. I would be front row centre.
Never see you again. Front row.
Because I think it's what we all wanted Bat Out of Hell to be. There's a lot of people who still like that music. It's just, there needs to be modicum of plot tying it all together.
Are there any other recognisable songs from Bat Out of Hell in Tanz Der Vampire?
I think it's just those two. But the one really recognisable song, of course, in Tanz Der Vampire is Total Eclipse of the Heart, the Bonnie Tyler song.
Do we know which came first?
I believe it's debated.
Okay. I remember very, 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 like the first days of Musical Talk, and my original co-presenter Andrew was always talking about it. So,
The original or the Broadway?
The German production.
Okay. So when I told you I liked it, you sneered at me because I think you associate it with the Broadway flop.
I think I just associate it with kind of Euro pop sensitivity. It's like Eurovision, you know. I picture women in white gowns with lots of smoke and a great big gothic guy kind of, you know, sort of floating around them. Am I right or wrong?
No, she wears a red dress.
Okay, fine. That's the kind of, you know, I'm thinking
and
Dracula's...
she turns into a kick-ass vampire.
Is it the Dracula, the Brides of Dracula and all that kind of stuff? And does it make any reference to Victorian literature, or is it just nonsense?
Not that I would notice, but again, my German is only good enough to understand half the words.
Okay. Did the Broadway production?
I don't believe so. No, the Broadway production was just so silly, though. They changed the character so that instead of being all suave and mysterious, he's like a rock star, and with a really bad Italian accent because of reasons.
To be fair, though, when you sent it to me, it did take me about 15 seconds to remember that it was Michael Crawford. He gives quite a good performance. It's
sure.
just not of a vampire.
Right.
It's like Gino D'Acampo.
Right. It's very strange. And then because he is so, you know, over the top, silly, with all the very puerile humour, when he launches into the song I sent you, Unschnurrbare Gier, I don't know what they called it on the Broadway one, probably Insatiable Appetite. It's a very sincere song about his memories of the people that he's killed and his regrets. And it just doesn't work if you've got this extremely camp over the top character.
Maybe he has two personalities. Maybe he has the inner wrought self where he can sing his, you know, deep emotional thoughts, and he has the... This is absolute nonsense. Of course he doesn't.
Right. Yeah, I think that's maybe what they were going for, but I don't think it worked.
Well, thank you, Michael Crawford, for ruining Rachel's favourite musical of all time, not Phantom of the Opera, the other one. It's a show that I wish we had a good English recording in with good lyrics, and one day we might.
Yeah, spend a few months on Duolingo learning German, and then go watch the German version.
You love the German accent.
Well, I think German is a very rhythmic language, and it also has words for things that we just don't have words for, and so they're able to evoke
like
ideas
getting
that
happiness
would be...
out of people's pain.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's such a great word, we've just adopted it. And so you can do things in one line that would take you a whole verse in English.
Tanz Der Vampire, come to the Dominion. There'll be a theatre for it soon.
That's mean.
Well, it's true.
Yeah.
Rachel, thank you very much, and we'll have you on again soon.
Sure.
For more information about Musical Talk, please visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk. You can email us at feedback@musicaltalk.co.uk, listen to past episodes on iTunes and YouTube, and follow our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.